Hello. The topic of this video is whom do you create for? Now it came about, I guess 2 days ago now, when I did a podcast called The Secret Twins Club that involved Alex Martin, Damian Sommer, Ryan Roth, and Daniel Steger. And we talked about the same topic, which is whom do you create for? Daniel and Alex both had two very contrasting views on who you should create for. Daniel Steger is very much a practical developer, or impractical. He's very practical when it comes to thinking about what he wants from his games, having control of his market, and sort of addressing those things. Alex is very on the other side of, which is being more creative and like freeform, not compromising the game for money and things like that. Where Daniel's being more practical and trying to make a living, and they're very two contrasting ideas, and I don't really represent them perfectly because I'm neither one of them, but that's sort of the gist of it. And so I've broken down what I feel whom you can create for into some categories, or like a sort of checklist, and there's by no means a need to only choose one of these things for whom you create for, because you can definitely create for yourself as well as for other people at the very same time. But sometimes they conflict, or they don't interact in the same way when it comes to motivating yourself when creating things for people. So obviously there's pretty much those two things, either yourself or for other people. But inside both of those two categories, I believe that there's 4 subcategories. These are creating for yourself. Under this one is you can create for the sake of creation, or you can create for the sake of consumption. The sake of creation is where you would make something and you enjoy making it for like the fun of that. Whereas the sake of consuming it is you would make something for the sake of using it later, or let's say you're making an art piece to look at it later, you're making a game to like play it yourself. The other two categories, because I'm going with 4, are under the creating for other people, and this is for creating for an audience of people an audience, and then the final one is to create for specific people or a specific group of people, anything like you know who they are, sort of thing. By no means are any of these categories the truth or fact. This is merely how I've sort of broken it down, and if there's anything that I'm missing, I'd like to hear about it, or what people think of how it's broken down. Now, for the purpose of this breaking down of the things, I'm going to be giving a worth to each of them in a sense of motivation. Because when you're creating something, it is a good question to ask who you create for, but why? What's the point of thinking about that? I'm going along with the line that you want to create something for a reason, and that reason brings motivation to you. It can also be sort of I want to make a thing, but I need to figure out who I'm making it for so that I have a better idea of what I'm making, and that's also a good thing. So I'm just going to jump into the thing. So when you're making something for the sake of creating it, this is, I believe, the highest motivation that you can get from making a thing. And there are 4 things that I believe are underneath the sake of creation, that you can make something for yourself for 4 different reasons. First is exploration, whether it's creative exploration or you're exploring something within yourself or within the piece that you're making. And this is an extremely motivating thing. It's an intrinsic motivation, which means that you're doing it for the sake of itself or the thing. And that's like the most motivating thing. The second is the enjoyment of the task, which is you like to do the thing. You're like, I like programming, or I like drawing, or I like doing art, or whatever creative thing it is. And this is also a very motivating thing. It's an only intrinsic motivating thing, and you're doing the thing because you want to do it, and that's like a really motivating thing, and it'll keep you going. The third is for self-accomplishment, and this is not as motivating as the other two, I feel. It's sort of intrinsic, but it's also a semi-extrinsic motivator, as in like you're doing it for a purpose and not really for the sake of the thing, and that's a little bit less motivating than the first two, but it's still like pretty good. And then finally, when you're making something for yourself, you can do it for the sake of growth. Let's say you're like, I'm doing this thing so I can learn a new thing and I can like make better things later, and feel it's also not as motivating as the first two. So that's the sake of creation. Now, for the sake of consumption, where you're making something because you want to use it yourself. It's sort of the general thing. You can create it for like a few reasons. You can create it because it's a memento, or simply because you want to enjoy it. Like you make a game because you want to play it because you want that game to exist. And that's okay too, but I don't think it's as motivating as the first two where you're creating it, and this is only during the creation process that the motivation is giving you. And you can't really be super motivated to do the thing for the whole time because it's really for a purpose, like a completely separate purpose for making it, because you just want to consume it later. But remember, it doesn't only have to be this. You can be motivated by multiple different things. Now onto creating things for others. When you create something for an audience, there's two kinds of audiences that you can sort of create for. One would be you want to create it for as many people as possible, and the other is you would want to create it for, let's say, a specific audience, like a niche audience or your fan base or something like that. When you're creating for an audience, and they are sort of lumped together, there isn't like a huge difference, but they are still different kinds of things that you create for. That you can create it because you want, say, money from them or fame. And if you don't want to be so, you want to create for sustainability or exposure and things like that. These are purely extrinsic things. They definitely aren't as motivating as when you're going to make it for yourself. They're purely, you're making something because you're going to get something out of it later on, or like from the outside. And that's motivating still, but definitely not as much as if you're making something for the sake of making it because you enjoy doing it. But you can also create something for an audience that you want them to enjoy. And this is something very much that Alex sort of picked at, in that he creates things because he feels like it's something that he would want someone to enjoy later, which is a fairly motivating thing. It's not only from the outside that you actually have a deep motive to create something, because it's not only for something that you're going to gain, but you're doing it for these other people without expecting anything back. And finally, the fourth one, when you're creating for specific people, who can also be the people that you're making it with, your friends, any kind of specific person. There's sort of three things that you can create it for them for. It really has, I think, the only demotivating one, and that is because you feel obligated or you're forced to do it. This can also be applied to an audience, but I feel like it's more demotivating when it's from a specific person or a group of people that you're feeling expectations from or anything like that. And that is a really demotivating thing. Okay. And that is a really demotivating thing. Like, if you want to surprise someone with a gift because you feel really motivated to do that, and you're like, I like this person, I'm gonna give them a gift. And then suddenly the person says, I want you to buy me a gift. Now you know that they expect it. And it's the same thing for when you're doing anything creative. If somebody forces you to do it or makes you do it out of obligation and you're not actually wanting to do it, you're not going to be motivated at all. It also leads into the second one, where you can be motivated to do something for someone because you want to do it for them. Whereas if you want to get a gift for someone because you like them, or you want to make a game for someone, because you love them or something like that. That is like a semi-intrinsic, extrinsic thing. And it is more motivating than doing something for money or anything like that. And you're not motivated by external gains. As well as the third one, which can sort of also apply to the audience, is if you want to make something to represent yourself to someone. And this can sort of be broken down to two things as well. Whereas if you want to do something to represent yourself in an expressive way, where you want to sort of express, your true self to other people, or as a like sort of resume thing, where you want to make something to show who you are to other people. If you're just showing yourself, it's not really a creative exploration thing. It doesn't fall into that category. It's not super motivating, but it's still like a motivating thing. I mean, making your resume, if you're not just doing it to enjoy the task, can be kind of brutal, but it's still like sort of motivating. Now, all these categories said and done, there's sort of two things that set it up. That you can either be doing something for the sake of doing it, which is really motivating, or you do something for the sake of gaining something. Well, obviously, doing something for the sake of doing it is the most motivating thing. But, when you do something to gain something from other people, you need to, sell something because you need to sustain yourself or anything like that, which is obviously a need, and you can very much think about these things. It's not that it's, it's less motivating, but, you need money, could sort of think about that. And it's really hard to balance which one's which. It's really just a thing to think about. Do you do things for the sake of doing them, or do you do things for the sake of other purposes? So, who do you create for? Okay. Anyways, that's that on who do you create for? This is the first video. I hope that someone somewhere can take something from it, or it promotes some thoughts, but leave a comment or something if feel like there's something wrong or off or missing something, because that's okay, because I'd rather have the information be the best that it can be. Now I'm going to talk about a cool thing that we played, and I was really excited for it. It's a cool card game called Coup that Damien Sommer showed to us, like, I don't know if they played it before. And it's a really slick game that's sort of like Cheat, that old playing card game with the bluffing and the I play this many cards. Coup had like a really cool theme, and it was super slick and tiny. There were coins, and it was just a really amazing system where there was some really, really intense bluffing. And apparently it was kickstarted in May and did really well, and it's just a really cool concept, and I think that you should check it out.